they were putting that calcium down about 24 inches. And if they can get that root to go down deep enough to where it, say, if it does get real hot in the summertime, when the sun goes down and the moisture starts coming up, that root can reach it. And I think those will be the people that survive.
Yeah, my name is Jim Halbeisen, and this is my opinion.
Yeah, my name is Jim Halbeisen. I am heading up the Growers Mineral Corp podcast. And this week, since the spring is breaking free, a lot of guys in the north don't realize that there's farming going on in the south. So I thought it was critical to bring on some of the guys that we work with, south of Mason-Dixon line. And so we're going to flash over to South Carolina, right on the South Carolina-North Carolina border. I'm going to introduce Terry Norris and his son, Stephen. We work with them. Our guys that are looking for a tobacco expert, usually it's Terry and Stephen that they get a hold of. So I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what's going on right now in the South Carolina, North Carolina area.
Yeah, I'm Terry Norris, district manager in North and South Carolina, and Stephen, my son here. We kind of work as a team now. I guess probably one of the best ways to get started is with the growers program and what we're trying to accomplish here in the Carolinas. The guys are out in the field right now doing chiseling, trying to open up the land and burn the fields down so they can plant corn. And tobacco land is they putting their soil fumigates out now. Floor pick or Telon C is usually what they use. And that fumigate will stay in the soil on tobacco land for about 20 to 21 days. And then they go in and open it up, rebed it, and then they can transplant their tobacco. And usually what we recommend going in transplanting tobacco is putting like 2 gallons per acre in the transplant water. That works as well with produce like tomatoes, all kind of vegetables that you transplant. Like 2 gallons per acre works really well. We've had guys that use like 3 gallons to the acre in the transplant water, and using usually about 100 gallons of water to the acre. Some of the guys try to do when they transplant tobacco, maybe not as much on produce, but they get away with that pretty good.
Hey Terry, what kind of crop mix you guys got down there? So that kind of gives our guys some perspective on that types of crops that you guys are working with in your area.
Yeah, we're doing tobacco, corn, soybeans, wheat. Do some vegetables of all different kinds. A lot of tobacco, pasture and hay. We do some fruit crops, peaches, apples, grapes. We don't do anything like oranges, and you might see some up closer to the Georgia line that way. But
so hey, how do you guys split this up at all? In other words, does Stephen enjoy working with something different? Or does he like the row crops and you take care of the vegetables and the tobacco, or you guys pretty well do both of them together?
We're pretty much at this point doing everything together. I'm trying to get his feet wet in everything that we do. You know how it is when you start getting above 60, you never can tell what might happen. So I'd like to have him, pretty well versed in all the crops that we do. And one of the biggest things that we've been doing through the winter and in early spring here, you ride and look at the fields and you can see the weeds that are coming up now. and that tells you pretty much what you need to be doing in the way of limestone. And right now, the last week or so, we've been seeing a lot of what we got is it's kind of a red weed that it seeds out. It's a sour weed, and when I was young, we used to go out and pick them and chew them. It's kind of a tart, bitter type weed. But when you see a lot of that out in the field, you're really low in lime. We were yesterday. We stopped by one of our customers in Bladen County, and he was out on pretty heavy sandy land, and they had just dumped out some high cal lime, and where they dumped it out there, you couldn't even see the trail where the guy went in with the 18-wheeler.
Wow, it was that tight.
It was that tight.
Right.
And I asked the guy, I said, "You had any soil samples taken?" He said, "Yeah, we got them." He said, "Yeah, my calcium is very low." I said, "How about your magnesium?" He said, "Well, it's about 30%. I said,
"Oh, Lord."
"That's the reason." He says, "Where do you think we need to be?" He says, "The guys, agronomists we're talking with are saying they like to see about 20 to 30% on magnesium." And I said, "Oh, man, that's way too high."
Yeah.
And I said, using dolomitic lime, you're going to never get your calcium up and open this land up. And what they were trying to do was run a ripper down, and they were going to put fertilizer and calcium down in there. I said, "Well, I think that's a good idea."
Right.
Right. Get it down deep as they could. And they were fixing to get started. They had a couple of runs made where they had done it. You could tell a lot of difference, and they were putting some of that high cal lime down then, which I think that's a good thing. If you can get her down there, say 24 inches or so, I think that'll do that land a lot of good. But the way it is with that sand in it too, it's so tight. Even on sandy land, when they get an inch rain, man, they probably didn't even get a quarter inch.
Yeah, Terry makes a very good point. This 30% exchangeable magnesium. See, the whole premise of the growers program, which goes back to Victor Tegens that developed the growers program, we want to keep that calcium level at about 8 times the level of the magnesium on the cation exchange capacity. See, the cation exchange capacity was developed at the University of Wisconsin in the 20s when Victor Tegens was working on his master's. And what we have seen over the years is when you look at that CEC on your test, you want that calcium in that 75 to 80% range, but you want to squeeze that magnesium down to 10%. And, Terry's talking about the sandy land being tight, which traditionally it's more porous type of soil. But if you get that clay content in there and you get that magnesium too high, that's a problem. So that's one thing that even in the South, these guys are, looking at. And I would say with Stephen, what's your comment on that? Are you catching on to that soil test part of it, as far as looking at that exchangeable calcium, exchangeable magnesium thing?
Yeah, like you were saying, you got to get it right where it's not packed out and get it opened up. So yeah, I've been seeing them rip it open and trying to encourage, the use of the product to get it opened up, just like, we've been talking.
What about your source of calcium down there, guys? What are you relying on? Have you got basically the one quarry, or do you have several quarries that you're working with?
Well, we got one Wakestone, which is they have got theirs certified for North and South Carolina through Clemson, and I think NC State has certified it for North Carolina, which the guys, that's where we were at yesterday in North Carolina, and they had got theirs somewhere right in North Carolina there that came from the Wakestone mine. Now we have another one right there, which is coming off the same vein.
I see.
This vein runs a long way. It runs all the way to the beach, really, from Loris, and it's running around 40% calcium to 42%, which is really good.
Woo, I guess.
And the other mine they they call it a structural field, which is the same product, but it's not ground down to go through a 200 mesh screen, which Clemson and NC State requires. But it is only got like 15 to 20 foot of dirt on top of it,
Right.
in different places, which it falls apart really easy. You can take a grain as big as the end of your finger there and you can mash it with your fingers. It'll fall apart. And it's been my experience with that because we used it before any of it got certified. And but they said the only thing it was good for was driveways and
Yeah. Well, the thing I would like to point out is when you got that shallow deposit, it's more like an aragonite. And see, that term is flying around the industry, guys talking about getting aragonite offshore and shipping it in. And I think what Terry and Stephen have is a deposit that is similar to aragonite. And see, those coarser particles are breaking down for these guys. They've got experience with that. And what kind of, Stephen, when you work with guys, what kind of rates you tell these guys you think they ought to start with?
Basically, you want to get to that 7-to-1 to 8-to-1 ratio. So you're just looking to kind of get as close as you can and staying in balance of, that. So like anything else, they got to work with their pocketbook and, work on it in time and build it up. Yep. And so they can eventually get to that end goal of where the levels that you want to try to meet.
Yeah. We try to do strip tests, get guys to, put a strip in of a couple ton or 1 ton or 4 ton. And like you say, everybody castigates us saying that, we want the guy to overlime. He's got to work within his pocketbook. And see, that's a very key factor. And that's where that strip test is really critical. See, the thing they don't realize is it affects the biological life in soil. And that's something very hard to measure chemically. I mean, the COVID-19 test pretty well proved that to us. And so the strip test is where you're doing a biological experiment out there. And really, that's what we've proposed for 70 years, and guys are still doing that. And I think it applies for you guys down there as well as it does in, North Dakota, for example.
Jim, those guys we were talking to yesterday, they had this little gadget there that they had picked up somewhere, and you could probe it down in the soil there, and it'd tell you what the pH was. We went over to the lime pile that he had over there, and the pH in that was like 6.8. Mm-hmm. He probed it down in the ground, and it was 6.8.
Confusing, huh?
But yet you couldn't even kick the dirt with your foot without stumping your toe.
Yeah, that's right. See, that air factor, it's big everywhere because we're back to talking microbiological life. The symbiotic microbes are, aerobic in nature. They got to breathe oxygen. And see, that's why it's so critical to get that air in there. And see, our contention is you can rip it open mechanically, but as soon as you get that heavy rain, it just puddles right back together. That's why you got to get the calcium in there to hold that oxidation factor.
Yeah, I think these guys had the right idea about, putting it down as far as they could get it.
Right. And
I approve of that. And I didn't approve of their magnesium saturations. That was just way too high. And I told him, I said, look, you use magnesium to pack driveways and runways. That's why it's so tight. You want it tight, but you don't want your farmland that way because that biological down there has got to have it. You got to have it to the root of that plant. And without it, it's just going to die, just like you will if you can't get oxygen.
That's right. So you guys talk a little bit about the growers and the kind of rates you're looking at. Like if in corn production or even with soybeans, How do you approach a soybean crop, for example? Are you putting any in the soil, or are you foliar feeding everything? And what do you use for total volume, like on a soybean crop, if you're just foliar feeding?
On soybeans, it has a lot to do with the price. If the price is good, I like to see a guy use, say, 4 gallons
Mm-hmm.
to really get an extraordinary yield. But we've been getting really good yields with like 3 gallons with 2 sprays and doing most of it over the top. We used to would put 3 gallons down in the ground, and we were hanging around, say, 35 to 40, and even in good land, 60 bushel soybeans. But now, shoot, we're taking and putting like 2 sprays, with the Roundup, and I've seen guys get as high as 70 to 72 bushel soybeans and nothing in the ground. And I think that works pretty well with corn. I really like to see, and guys want to do it different ways, which if it works for them, that's fine. But I like to see maybe 4 to 5 gallons down on a 2x2, and that works like a starter. Plus, it's a full season fertilizer, and then get maybe waist high or so, depending on what you're using to spray with, and go over the top with a couple of gallons. And usually that will give you a good yield, especially on your lambs. But it has a lot to do too with the type soil you're in. If you're in real soil, sandy land, you're talking 7 gallons probably. And I like to see NA, the nutritional additive we have. If you can talk a man into doing 8 ounces per acre, I think that's probably the best you can do.
What are they doing with nitrogen, Gary? How much on corn?
Everybody you talk to is a different rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, I say, usually from whatever you've usually been doing, back off a little bit when you use this program, and the more calcium you get out there in the field, you can start backing back off of your fertilizer a little bit, especially if you're in good land. Because we usually rotate tobacco land, cotton land, peanut land, soybean land. All of that usually takes a rotation. And depending on how well you've got that depends on, I don't think you need a pound to a bushel.
Yeah. What's your customers telling you about their mix of crops down there? I mean, everybody's saying that cotton is just pathetic. So they look for some of these guys to raise more corn and back off on cotton. Are your guys talking anything about that? Or are they going to stay in their normal rotations?
I think it has a lot to do with the price.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get a good contract, they'll go with the cotton. Mm-hmm. And some farmers are doing quite well with the cotton and others aren't. That has a lot to do with the land you're putting it in also. It's sort of like tobacco. You don't want to go and put the sorriest land you got in tobacco. You want your very best. I think cotton is the same way. If you want to have a good yield, you got to have good land. Plus, we've taken a load of mediocre land and get the calcium rate up to around 80%, and bring it up to where it will grow good tobacco.
Sure.
And cotton even.
Yeah, really, that was the part of the predicate of More Food from Soil Science that Dr. Tejich wrote. He said, once you learn the science of calcium, you can take some of this marginal land and, grow a very decent crop on it. You might not have a bin buster, but you won't have near the input cost into it. And that's really what guys are looking for right now. I mean, they're trying to whittle on these input costs because, they're going to the moon. And as soon as the crop, like corn, goes up, nitrogen just tails right along with it. And, we've got some guys telling us that buy nitrogen direct from the docks, that usually when fuel price goes down, nitrogen goes down. This year it's doing the exact opposite. Nitrogen's going up, fuel's coming down. So something's going on out there.
We had about a 5 or 6 acre field that we worked that belonged to my uncle, and we leased it from him. But that was just high sand. and they hadn't. Before we started renting it from him, he had good land, but that particular spot, it was right on the edge of a swamp, and it was just pure sand. And we were taking our high cal lime and gypsum and and just dropping it off in that field to as the vocal center. When we'd start spreading, we just go there and pick it up. And I told my brother we were working that together, and I told him, I said, let's leave some out there and just dist it in deep and see if we can get that land. No, man, we can't do that. It won't grow nothing. I said, I believe it will. I just want to know for myself. I said, we're not going to lose that much on 5 acres. So we planted soybeans in it, and guess what? We had 29 bushels to the acre, and that thing hadn't grown a crop in probably 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So that proved the whole
Yeah.
premise of calcium right there.
Yeah. No, see, I've seen that around the country, Terry. Guys have fields that Dad said we can't grow crap in there, and man, they get that calcium on it. All of a sudden, now they've got a crop. So, yeah, no, it's a whole different ball game. So, Stephen, I'd like you to kind of talk about what do you think the real key is for you? If Dad's gone tomorrow, what do you think is the really key thing for you to talk to potential customers about? Where do they need to start, and what do they need to follow?
Well, pretty much you just need to keep on the same program and keep the same philosophies and just keep pushing the same thing and getting, the mentality of getting the soil to the right place so that they can get the land working, the microorganisms working, and everything in place, and eventually just keep moving that train along and keeping it going.
Yep.
Keep everything in balance.
That's right. I agree with that. So where are you guys? I mean, are they about ready to go full bore down there, in your opinion, or are they talking to any? Oh, I know one thing that I would like you to comment on is how dry are you?
Oh, man. The swamps are still dry. We've been getting just enough water for maybe the top couple of 2 or 3 inches for these guys to start planting corn now. But like you say, we're out here now, and all these trees are taking on water, and it's going to be a new situation. I hadn't seen this since I was, I don't know, probably a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
For it to be this dry and going into spring. Usually we're wet in the spring and then it dries off, and then we go into drought. We're going into drought at plants, so this is going to be a different deal here. I don't know. To get us where we need to be with our water table right now, and the swamps and the rivers and the ditches, and we're going to just about have to have a tropical storm to come in and wet us up real good. But I'm hoping that ain't going to happen either. But if we can keep getting, the couple inches of rain a week or whatever, keep everything going, we can survive. But the main thing I think is like these guys were doing yesterday. They were putting that calcium down about 24 inches. And if they can get that root to go down deep enough to where, say, if it does get real hot in the summertime, when the sun goes down and the moisture starts coming up, that root can reach it. And I think those will be the people that survive.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. That's part of the predicate of the growers program. Get that root penetration and give the plant a half a chance to try to survive when you get adversity. I mean, when you have perfect rainfall, who cares? Fly on the seed, cultivate in the rows, and go fishing. But man, when we start bringing on adversity, we separate the men from the boys. So that's really what
See,
we're
what a
trying
lot
to
of
do.
these guys don't understand with most of the fertilizers out there, or pretty much all the fertilizers out there, you got heavy salt, heavy metals.
Yep.
And when you get in a drought situation, it's just terrible to that root. I mean, it just will kill it. It'll kill the plant. And that's where we stand out. We don't have that.
Right.
So what's your situation? You got any livestock down there at all, Terry, before we close this thing down? This cattle thing, man, last week when we were talking to Armstrong, that's all he wanted to talk about. Well, he's cow-calf guy. Have you got any guys down there, or is that pretty well thinned out?
We do. Not every farmer, but a lot of the farmers are running, say, 25 to some of them up to 100 head.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Laurel, Lewis, and Kenny, they usually keep somewhere close to 100.
Ah, very good.
And they've been doing quite well with them probably for the last 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. That quality of feed is a big deal. So I'd say, Terry, if you got anything you want to conclude with, let's. What do you want to tell us Yankees up north here? We better beware of if you're going to send us any dry weather, or what's going to be the deal?
According to forecasts, it looks like we're going to be in a drought situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, how far north or how far south that's going to go, or whether it's going to be more in the center of the country. I mean, we never know. A lot of times we've been pretty fortunate because of storms that come in off the coast, and if we can get the light ones and bring us in 2 or 3 inches of rain, I've seen, we had one year with tobacco, I had just made one cropping, one barn, I say, and we had a tornado. I say a tornado. We had a hurricane come in and put every hill of tobacco we had on the ground, and it rained and rained and rained. We had like 6 inches of rain, and then the wind came, and it just put it all down. And we spent 11 working days. So you never know. And we were in a little bit of a drought when that happened, and that changed that. But once I got it stood up, we sprayed it with growers, 3 gallons, and I started the next day stripping everything as I went. And we made our tobacco pounds and had, I believe it was like 6 barns over. So, you can't count a year out.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Till the year's over, you know what I mean?
That's right, exactly. Well, we give guys options with that foliar feeding, and if it's bone dry this year, we think that's going to be a big aspect.
I think that's going to be one big thing that's going to help us out.
Yep, I agree 100%.
If this weather don't give us a lot of rain, we're going to have to keep it alive.
Yep.
I don't know, with these disaster programs, how much money we can continue to hand out. But somebody at some point is going to have to try to make a crop.
Yep, exactly.
And that's always been my deal. I farmed pretty much all my life, and it didn't matter what kind of situation we were in. I tried to make a crop, regardless. Instead of trying to collect insurance on
it. Okay, gentlemen. Hey, I appreciate it. Fine job. We'll try to get back to you in the summer if it is bone dry and see what your guys are doing down there, and that'll give our guys something to work with. Appreciate it.
It's a good setting. Thank you.
Take care.
This podcast has been brought to you by Growers Mineral. Please visit growersmineral.com.